speaking about overcoming the legacies of racism and white supremacy globally and in South Africa in particular. Race remains crucial as an intellectual and social engagement at the NWU in its pursuit of being a leading university known for an ethic of care. As we strive to nurture tomorrow's leaders, we recognize the need for constant reflection on and engagement with historics of racism in our institution and how those histories continue to shape the communities we participate in. It is by now well understood how histories and political economies of racist dispossession and devaluation continue to materially and symbolically gatekeep economic, epistemic, and linguistic access to the social goods of citizenship, including education and work. Against this backdrop, and fully acknowledging the loss and devastation that the pandemic has wrought in our lives, COVID 19 has intersected with racist histories and inequalities to differentially impact the lives of ordinary South Africans. It has brought into stark relief the inherited social fault lines and allowed deep reflection on how to avoid reproducing or deepening these, as well as we collectively work towards a post-pandemic new normal. We would like to know, what do you say on this backdrop? Up.
with it racism. Race is something that we at Northwest University take very, very seriously, and we do it because it is so much a part of our history, not simply as a university, but as a country. Race has contributed to a significant legacy that has to damage the psyche of our life as citizens of this beautiful country. And through the efforts of all those who have fought against racism, we have reached a point since 1994 when we have been liberated from the disease of racism, but significantly pockets and elements, and we should also say vestiges of that disease remain. And so it is an ongoing struggle for us as a university to banish all traces of racism wherever we see it, to deal with race as an ideological construct, and to work with staff and students to create the inclusive society that we want to see being realized on our campuses, throughout all universities in this country, and also to work towards the creation of a South African society where race will not be will not have the influence and the negative consequences that it has had. I would just like to share an anecdote at this point. Race is not something abstract and something that we should treat as simply an intellectual matter. Many of us who live in this country have been exposed to racism in different forms. In 1976, at the height of the student uprisings, when the discrimination suffered by students reached its peak, we know the Soweto uprising proved to be a significant event which, more than anything else, signified a protest against race and racism. But in that year, I was still at high school, and I was very interested in studying Christian theology, and I wanted to do a degree in theology, and so I wrote a letter to the registrar at the Potchefstroom University for Christian Higher Education. I was very excited about this application or this inquiry because Potchefstroom University at that time was the only university that had this label, Christian Higher Education. But after I got an unwelcome reply indicating that in terms of the laws of the country at the time, I was not permitted to come and study here. And so my, you may say, naive wish or desire or dream was dashed at that time. But it was only later that I began to understand what Christian national education was as it was being practiced at that time by the government. So we, like this, personal experience, many of us have had terrible experiences at the hands of racists, and we at the university over the years have had to deal with a number of incidents. But today is also a day, I think, of celebration because we have made very significant changes as a university. We have made great strides in overcoming the barriers of racism, not only in our admissions policy, but in our residences, in our practice of academic life, in the cascading of the hidden curriculum in all aspects of university life. The university is moving forward, and transformation and the need for diversity informs all aspects of our strategy as a university and is daily being put on the table for discussion and, most seriously, for implementation. So race has no place as a factor in all our decision-making, and the practice of racism must certainly be a thing of the past. And so we celebrate our efforts today in the midst of this pandemic. It has proved a very challenging time for us as a university, but the fact that we can dedicate a week of our time and focus on the issue of race speaks volumes to me, and I hope to you. We take race seriously, and let us engage through art, through speech, through storytelling, through our different activities on how we can banish this dreaded disease that race brings into our societies. Thank you for your efforts, and I look forward to continuing the observation and the celebration with you. Thank you.
Program Director, members of the Humanities Student Academic Chapter, Dr. Andre Goodrich, members of the NW community, speakers and guests, I greet you all with the highest respects and with all protocol observed. I wish to pass my greatest gratitude to the program director and to everyone involved in the construction of such a salient and significant program. The NW community has received the unveiling of this program with much appreciation and with excitement, because it is such programs that create the platform for intellectual, social, and political, and also cultural engagements in the educational environment. It is such platforms that allow us to dispensate the conceptual and the cognitive knowledge, and to some extent the wisdom that we have gathered from this esteemed institution of ours. It is also such programs that allow us to table the social and demographical challenges that we often come across on the spectrum of race, culture, and the socio-economic scale that is affiliated with white supremacy. Such a platform affords the afflicted the freedom to table these challenges without fear or favor, without the elements of victimization and verbal harm, while promoting the freedom of expression and the quality of discourse. Race Week seeks to achieve the above-mentioned discourse in a manner that critically unpacks and analyzes and also reflects upon the social dynamics that continue to have an effect on us, while enlarging the presence of cognitive dissonance. Politics, as an attribute of Race Week, is a space where students are reluctant to participate, while others wish that they could do without politics, and others wishing that politics can be separated from education. It is impossible to separate politics from any sphere of life, be it education, religion, or anything. This is because politics is similar to civilization. It always emerges when there is an arrangement of people towards a common purpose. A crucial example of the existence of politics is the much debated decolonization of education. Colonization has ceased to exist in its physical political form, but still exists as a psychological proclivity and institutional discourse. A good example is our study unit slides that we receive as an educational material from the NWU. The NWU is constitutionally founded on a 3-tier language system, which is English, Afrikaans, and Setswana. However, in most of our material compiled by the institution, a study unit slide will be written in English on the left-hand side and Afrikaans on the right-hand side, to the exclusion of Setswana. This arrangement is not only a transgression of the 3-tier language system, but it is also a contributing detail towards white supremacy. It gives the white child an advantage of referring to their mother tongue if they cannot understand a concept in English, and thus leaving an African and international child to either comprehend the concept in English or resort to additional research measures. This highlights the crucial need for transformation and in the educational sphere in general. Transformation is not the eradication of white culture. It is not the eradication of white identity, but it is the acknowledgement and recognition of cultures outside of white cultures, and that is African culture in particular. Once the system integrates African culture and other cultures with that of white and all other cultures to the fair and just advantage of everyone, then we can only state then that we have reached a point of transformation and reform in this beautiful institution of ours. That on its own establishes white supremacy as an element of politics in the educational environment, which justifies the fact that politics and engagements of this magnitude cannot be separated from anything. Alongside the pressing issues that will be tabled by Race Week is the COVID-19 pandemic. How the COVID-19 pandemic affected everyone, and also how were they affected on the basis of their race and their social position in society. COVID-19 affected the distinguishing races differently, in such that those who are in possession of the country's wealth, those who are favored by the system, and that is a reference to white people in their majority, didn't suffer that much as they had the monetary means to combat the effects of COVID-19. On the other hand, it was millions of African people who queued the long lines of SASSA grants just to make a living out of 350 rand because the pandemic took them off the street. It shut down the informal sector dominated by Africans, while the white-dominated formal sector was hugged with large corporate relief packages from the state, and thus justifying the narrative of the system being in favor of white people. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is the decorum of Race Week. Let us contribute with confidence. Let us contribute without fear or favor, and certainly with the intention to reciprocate knowledge and wisdom. I thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Andre Goodrich. I'm the director of the School of Social Sciences here at Northwest University. And I'm just wanting to speak a little bit about the general theme of this year's Race Week. So as you've already heard, Race Week forms a very important part of the NWU's annual calendar. And it's important precisely because as an institution that's serious about transformation, it's essential that we create opportunities durably to reflect upon where we are, where we've come from, and where we plan to get to. In the context of the university being an institution that, at least at some level, aims to help those students and other community members to transcend the categories in which we've been raised and come to operate in the world, it's really necessary for us to take on the big categories like race, gender, and so on. We are, of course, hopefully on the tail end of a 2-year global pandemic that's seen dramatic changes to how universities operate, particularly going remote. And while going remote has, in some respects, offered many opportunities for change, it's also important that we pause to think about the ways in which this movement into a much more technologically based set of relationships between staff, students, and other community members also risks extending and deepening some of the social fault lines that we've inherited and that we strive to overcome. So this year's program is very much centered around the relationship between COVID-19 and race, and we've put together a program that addresses some of the areas that we think are of particular importance. We've tried to make it really emphasizing student voices, and so if you join the program for the rest of this week, you're going to see many students speaking from their perspective, which obviously is one of the perspectives that we need to take most seriously, especially in terms of calls for decolonizing higher education. Topics will include how student agency is changing in the pandemic conditions. With universities now able to go online at will, what are the opportunities for students to raise their voices and their dissatisfactions as the academic program and the bureaucratic program unfolds throughout the year. So that's one of the areas where we're really going to be considering hopefully having a very deep and meaningful conversation. Another area that's going to be really important, if you join us at 11, Divine Pho, who's the Director of Humour at the University of Cape Town, will be talking about the broader relationships of technology. we tend to hold it in our hands, use it, and rely on it in our everyday lives. But it comes through quite sometimes devastating chains of production. Where do the minerals come from? Where are the devices assembled? And as a university, if we take seriously the idea of transcending the categories that underpin inequality in the world we live in, we need to understand how we're complicit and what we can do to overcome that. So this concludes our launch event for the program. Thank you all very much for your participation, and please join us again at 11 o'clock for Divine's presentation. Thank you very much.
Waiting. I don't know what poverty and solving that. Once you take away the terms problem and development, many of our governments have no purpose any longer, and it tells you the depth of the problem that we have. We are existing within a particular framework that only frames us as people who have to receive, and within this framework we are just raw materials or kind of a working class only fit to be exploited. You know, we will never be in a space where we are able to actually participate as people who can actually think and contribute meaningfully to this new what is called this new tech revolution. And I'm going to draw to a close by saying that I relate this to what I call the original sin, and the original sin of tech. And the original sin of tech for me is for us to go back to look at the history of the development and the growth of tech itself. And as we have known, as we have seen in the past few years about the political economy of tech itself as a tool. On the one side, we have the ethical issues of how the industry of tech itself function, and that for tech to be able to operate, for me to be able to be on this Skype, for me to be able to be on this Zoom, for me to be able to do this virtual work, that many children have to die in Congo, in DRC, that women have to live through rape in DRC. And that every time I'm touching my computer or I'm using a smart car, I'm using a smartphone, it means that bodies are being violated in West Africa, you know, and many other places. But, you know, all this idea that we are going green, you know, we are creating this stuff, we are not burning trees, we are not digging the soil, you know, for oil, you know, but, you know, we say this is all clean tech, but people have to die. Bodies are struggling and dying in many parts. Wars are booming up in lots of other parts, just so that we should feed this new desire that we have to be able to run tech and have this virtual meeting. So that's the one side. You have the original sin that this is born out of a particular greed to accumulate and not necessarily to liberate people, and also to frame certain lives, you know, to use Judith Butler within certain brackets of precarity and precariousness, and that those lives are not worth grievable, and that we can continue to punish them as long as we can sit in front of our tech and have a virtual meeting. And the other original sin is just the essence of tech itself, and that in my view, in my reading, tech is born out of very problematic masculinities, what I call keyhole masculinities. And you can look at all of those who will become famous in this tech revolution. If you look at the richest people in the world right now, these are people actually who are in the tech world. You know, Zuckerberg, you know, you have even those who are media personalities, you know, Winfrey, you look at Bill Gates, you look at all of those who are able to jump to the sky for 1 second to get a quickie and come back, you know. So this tech is born out of problematic masculinities, people who were in garages. And here I'm talking about also surveillance, the people who find it easy to survey. I call them keyhole masculinities because these are people who really spend their time behind in garages and in places where they were really not visible and were really doing very dodgy work, but that we have legitimated this dodgy work to survey people as norm. And that we have taken this and use it as a term to liberate people, I think is very problematic. And that's why I push that we have to go back to the training of tech people, training of coders, training of those who work in that industry, so that we are able to place ethics at the core of them having to build technology. Otherwise, tech will continue to be racist and also will continue to exclude people. Tech will continue to be sexist and will continue to exclude people. Tech will continue to be misogynist and will continue to exclude people, because this is what it was made. You just need to play video games and to see the kinds of bodily representations of either the women or the men that are in those spaces, and also the kinds of violence that happens in those places, which tells you the imagination that people in those spaces also have about this thing, and that is why, to conclude, I continue to emphasize that the tech itself needs to be dissented. That we need to dissent, and dissent, which means that we are able to develop tech away from the Cartesian subject, and that this Cartesian subject is too dominant. The future of tech, for us to liberate ourselves from this trap, liberate ourselves from this oppression, is to dissent. And dissenting means becoming comfortable with who we are without apology, and knowing that we are connected people even when we evolve. We are people whose values, it's not necessarily because we are individuals, but because we are connected. So how do we build tech that takes that into consideration? How do we build tech that actually adopts other values of personhood, other values, or what the late Hari Garuba, who talks about developing new circuits of value, new circuits of how we value people, new circuits of how we value knowledge. And I think the first thing is to do that, is to shift away from finding ways on these continents to think and relate to tech, taking on board the Cartesian subject, the convivial subject, the incomplete subject. The other is just to bear in mind and to ask ourselves, what do we do with the original sin? The original sin of tech, which is about having to deal with problematic and misogynist masculinities, to ensure that we do not build tech that is misogynist, because tech is already misogynist right from the beginning. It's toxic from the beginning. It's racist right from the beginning. So how do we shift away from from this? And the second is just to understand that the knowledge on which algorithms are constituted, on which the data on which we constitute this tech, on which we are doing machine learning, is a data that is quite dependent on the colonial library. So what do we do with this information? So we actually on this continent have a lot to do, like Hamid Dabashi and Mignolo respond to Zizek. We must not necessarily have a conversation with you. And every time we have a discussion, it's not about you, Europe. We have to find ways of having conversations with ourselves, and not necessarily having to fight to compete, to be like the world or part of the world, because the world will adjust to us. We are the future, not necessarily because we are advanced in the technology of the West, but because we actually have particular challenges that will help the world to exist. And embracing ourselves as connected persons, embracing ourselves as social persons, embracing ourselves as people who do not have IP addresses that you can actually identify and who are constantly shifting, I think is the future of tech, and will help us to de-racialize tech, to de-misogynize tech, and also to deal with all of the problems of tech that continue to treat people as just objects of contributing to this global economy. I will end there to that. Thank you very much for listening.
Hi, Dr. Fu. Thank you for your presentation. Well, as you can see, we're all in Mafike, and I'll be facilitating the Mafike aspect, whereby all the other people who are around here will be able to ask questions relating to your what we call presentation. Anybody has a question? Again, I'm not sure if, because if there are other questions in other Potchefstroom or Val, which could be addressed and be sent to the speaker and would call comment. Because I think just my own comment, listening to the speaker, some of us are technologically challenged when it comes to the tech issues. Therefore, the language itself is even new to what we call some of us. Therefore, I'm probably going to try and phrase one of my questions, basically when you talk about, I think I noted down as you're presenting, but essentially, how do you create a non-discriminatory tech? I mean, if tech has been basically started with purpose of discrimination, how do you really take discrimination out of it? And I'm using the word discrimination as you've used misogyny and others, etc. If I'm using it as a generic term.
Thank you very much for your question. I appreciate it. It's quite new to all of us, just to to acknowledge that it's new to all of us, and we are learning as it goes. Again, to emphasize that for us to actually engage with tech in a way that will be meaningful to us as a people, we actually have to invest very deeply in understanding the history of tech, and also it's also the history of modernity, because we have to go back to the birth of technology and how it is born out of a particular economic context. It's born out of massification. It's also born out of a time when people have a problem with having level, and that we need to find new ways of ensuring that we produce fast and accumulate fast. So it's also born out of accumulation. The idea that technologies is actually created to make life easier for people, I think it's something that has been marketed falsely for too long. We look at the history of technology and how technology comes out of the industrial era. We understand that tech in itself is born because capital needs a particular way to accumulate, and to accumulate as much as it can, to accumulate as fast as it can, and to also be able to exploit people in ways that are just not possible. But also that tech needs to spread itself, to extend itself. That industrialization comes with colonization, that it comes with people having the possibility to be able to extend their violence and oppression to places that were not possible before. It's not a surprise. So, and that it's also used as a way to classify societies as either primitive or to classify them within a progressive, a linear platform. It's also not surprising. So I think we need to go back there to understand its birth and its evolution. And then on the other side, it's to revisit, all of these debates around knowledge production. What do you do with something that is part of you? That's really the key, because like the debate about decolonization is not necessarily that we have to have, like Samir Amin has argued, a complete rupture, but that we have to find ways of having to contain this thing that is part of us. How do we turn this thing into something that adds more value to us than take value away from us? Tech is born out of a racist context. Tech is born out of a misogynist context. Tech is born also because patriarchy needs particular ways of having to facilitate its life and also extend its oppression. Tech is born because a society that considers itself as supremacist needs to exert its power upon the world and upon those that are around it. Tech is born because the bourgeoisie and also those who own forces, of production and also capital need to be able to find more ways, to exploit. They are not making the lives of the working class better. It's actually born out of context to make sure they find more ways to both exploit and at the same time having to make their lives even more miserable. So how do we make it, how do we de-racialize it? And I think that the first is to begin to have a conversation first amongst ourselves. What do we, because right now what we're doing is trying to catch up. What we're trying to do is to be part of this global capitalist context. How do we build upon a technology and build upon it in such a way that it actually is able to respond to our own circuits of value? We have to create new circuits of value. And I think that's where the response is. We have to be able to think about progress not necessarily as linear. And these are old questions. We have to look at different ethnos of progress. What do we need tech for? And I think that building tech that is adjusted to our ideas of valuing personhood is what we actually need. Right now, we are building tech to accumulate. We are building tech to make life easier so that accumulation can be made possible. It's not necessarily to improve livelihoods. And I think how do you de-racialize tech is to be able to have a very honest conversation about ourselves. What do we need it for? How do we ensure that the circuits of value that we have or terms of value that we have are actually made possible by this tech? That would be my response.
Okay, I think there's a question from, okay.
All right. Thank you so much for the presentation. May I also ask a question on perhaps an aspect of looking through the technology through the colonial lenses as well? If we look and perhaps if we get what you say from the issue of tech being developed from racial sense or perspective, would it be proper to, in a way, when you de-racialize the issue of tech, to begin to think of whether it would be feasible from the African context, one, and if you take race away from tech, is it not also going to lead to other issues or matters such as ethnocentrism, etc.? I'm just worried that for us to continue to use smartphones as we know them, we know the atrocities, we know the pain that other peoples are going through in the African context. And that to me is a bit immoral for us to continue to then use the same thing that other people have to suffer for us to be able to use a smartphone. It's multinational companies that actually gain in this instance. And we then also want to add or perpetuate that to talk about artificial intelligence, for us to say, yes, for us to go to another level as Africans, we need to get into technology, be able to use it, and talk about things like artificial intelligence.
Wouldn't things like that, where you're exchanging knowledge among Africans more so than Western countries, and actually allowing us to learn amongst each other rather than constantly absorbing and then regurgitating knowledge from the West?
Okay, thank you.
Great. Should I respond? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Those are very interesting questions, and also thank you for your questions and for engaging. I'm going to start with the last question. So the idea of African education is something that we have to interrogate, because we evolved in this global system. The other day, lots of students were graduating across the country. I was here at UCT, and my students were graduating. I mean, their parents were not around. We become parents, so we were there, and it was just amazing to see the joy across lots of different families. And you have all people say, oh, I'm a first generation graduate in my family, I'm a second generation, and lots of people very excited, you know, about this. So that was really exciting, but it was also very sad, because this has become the thing through which the object through which we value ourselves. And we should be asking ourselves lots of questions. How did it happen that having a degree from a university made you a more valuable person than many other people? How did it happen that we actually spend our lives fighting to have this degree? How did it happen? You know, and this is what Otonji means by extroversion. And this is also what I think it's Samir Amin is talking about, delinking. And that we really have to ask serious questions about this, that people are dancing across the stage, people are coming all in their traditional wears and regalias, people have brought all of their families from afar, paid lots of flights, given a lot of money to capital to come here and celebrate having a paper, you know. Yeah, it's in a way it's sad. So, and I'm saying this also as one who is operating in a university, you know. So we have to ask ourselves lots of questions. You know, we on the one side we want to decolonize, but on the other side we can't. You know, so what does it mean to exist with this virus? Because this is a virus that we've inherited, and you have everyone across the university telling you, and across the country telling you how things have changed because it's very different right now. Things have changed because we are doing the process very differently, but it still remains that we are celebrating going to have someone to put that hat and put that thing on your head, and out of a sudden you become a better human being. You know, this is so sad. This is so sad in a place where actually you get your value by being something else. You know, you have not saved a life. You have not done anything. You've had a paper, you know. So that's the one. What we mean by education and African education is something that we have to ask ourselves, especially in this country, you know, where we are still debating people having to do TVET colleges, do lots of other stuff where everything everyone wants is to have a degree, you know. So that's one.
Can I interject there? I think the question was more encourage exchanges within the African continent.
Yes, I'm getting it.
Yeah, that was I think the last question.
I'm getting to that question. Yeah. So
okay, I'm to the question. Sure.
Yeah, I'm starting.
Because I'm looking at the time now, and I'm getting antsy.
Yeah, no, I'm going to end now, but I'm starting at that question because first you have to think about the content, because the thing was about African education and exchanges about African education, because, you know, you have to ask, what are you exchanging and what are you exchanging for? So that's really important. And also, when you talk about language, language also has to deal with concepts. Language has to deal with ideas, because even if you speak in African languages, the concepts still remain the same, because what we are doing is just translating and transmitting. Science is made up of concepts and conceptual work, unless we begin to think about how to see the world through concepts. We will make it intelligible, but we will make it unintelligible to us, because it will be intelligible through other concepts from elsewhere, and all we have done is just to translate. So that's really important. The work that we have to do is to find what Akizerbo is talking about. When you sleep on the mats of others, you're sleeping on the floor. So we have to first start by ensuring that we understand and engage and look for concepts that make our life intelligible. And then the language will follow automatically, because those concepts come with our language. You can only understand them with our language. You cannot translate those concepts. So that's very important. And then we can do the exchanges, you know, within different countries. The other question, which was about how you deracialize tech and how tech will not make life easy. I agree with you, and I'm glad that you agree with me. The obsession with tech, the way it is, will not make our life easily. It will make privilege easy. It will make luxury easy. If you're poor, it won't make your life easy as a poor person, because it only allows you to be able to. A colleague told me the other day that they had just bought a smart car, and they just bought a hybrid car, and they just bought a car, and that petrol, it does not use a lot of petrol, you know, but it costs them a lot of money. And they were saying, oh, why doesn't government invest in this? They don't understand, because it will make the environment very clean. I agree, it will. But at the same time, what should government do? Not give houses to people, not give food to people, not give health to people. To be able to operate on that context, you need to be able to have access to certain sets of resources. The privilege will continue, you know. That is really important, you know. And then the second is about the tech already comes with this assumption, crazy. That's my view. Tech comes with its assumptions. Unless we change what tech needs to do for us, we need to find what tech needs to do for us. When we say we are making a tech to improve life, what do we mean by improving life? Because improving life in one context is very different from improving life from another context. The challenge is that we have globalized what we mean by improving life. We have globalized what we mean by the good life. We have globalized what we mean by inhabiting a world in which people are better, because we measure the same. In Cameroon, we want to know how many, what's the distance to fetch water. If we come to South Africa, we measure the distance to fetch water. We go to Namibia, we measure the distance to fetch water. We have globalized and standardized it. That's the thing, you know? But what does it mean to improve life in a particular context? Those are things that, hard questions that we need to ask, but we are not asking. On this continent, we have to invest in those questions. That is what it means to deracialize. Because you cannot deracialize with different concepts, because those concepts are not named for your context. As Eliseo Makambo has argued about black box effects, that concepts hide particular histories of their origins. The concepts are born out of particular contexts. So when you have to make your world intelligible through those concepts, you're actually doing yourself a lot of injustice. Sometimes you build on them, but you need to find concepts to make your life intelligible. Once we start doing that, we already start the process of deracializing tech and many other things.
Okay, thank you. I think is the follow-up. There's a follow-up to the first question.
Okay, I actually wanted to ask, when you say we've globalized our way of living, I would think that it's not necessarily globalization, more like colonialization, because to globalize something is to make it run throughout the whole of Africa and internationally, whereas this is more of Western adaptation. We've adapted to Western colonial eras and colonial expectations, and more so away from our own. Instead of globalizing African culture, African people, the African ideology, we have accepted what other people have brought to us and made it the standard. And it now comes to question is, did we not have our own standards? It is, to my belief, that Africa had its own universities way before European culture. So my question is, were our universities not enough, or have we just completely abandoned the fact that we were better without?
No, thank you. Let me just respond quickly. I mean, I like to argue, and this is a very controversial argument, that the idea of a university is foreign to us. So it's important because we need to understand what the university is and where it was born, what context it was born, in the context of Europe, in the context of monastery, in the context of Christianity. It doesn't mean that we didn't have collective learning or we didn't have spaces where they were critiqued. But I don't think it was this idea of university that we have today, a place where lots of nerds and insecure people come to compete with each other, you know, to be more privileged than other spaces. Also a place of producing knowledge. It doesn't mean it's not important, but I think the university is a concept that is outside our context. But I'm not saying we should dismiss it. I'm just saying it's one way of learning. We have to embrace it, but we need to create different circuits of value. And I'm glad, I mean, what you're talking about, standardizing Eurocent, that's what I mean by we have globalized and standardized this way of being. When we ask, we need to all work towards the sustainable development goals, and there are 13 sustainable development goals. It's great. Yeah, but 13 sustainable development goals for who? You know, for others. These are the things that we have to interrogate. They are hard questions. It means we have to lose certain things, have to lose privileges, have to lose certain comforts, have to lose certain ideas that we hold very dear, have to lose certain things that have become part of us, have to lose certain things that we have spent our life aspiring to. I've spent my life trying to be a professor. You want to take it away from me. What does that mean? You know, and I think for me, that's what we need to engage and interrogate critically. But it will be very hard. But for me, that's the only way to liberate ourselves.
Okay. It looks like there are no more hands. But I think there's a question that we can quickly address with a few minutes left.
Okay.
The last one on chat.
Okay, Tabang is asking, why should we believe that the use of technologies will actually lead to any kind of development, given the extent of existing inequalities in the context? Yeah, I think we have to say, I've said several things. One, we need to interrogate what we mean by development. Development is important, but it's not the only way to create improved societies or to improve a dignified life. So building a dignified society, respectable society is very important, and there are many ways to do that, including what we call development today. It also means that we have to understand inequality in many different ways, because currently we are understanding inequality in a particular way. And I think once we do that, we will create a more fair society. We need a pluriversal space with pluriversal concepts to be able to improve life. But our aim is to create a dignified society, a respectable society, and a place where we are able to cohabit with each other without treating each other as better or primitive. Thank you.
Any last question from either of the campuses? It looks like there are no questions, except I think there's a chat.
Okay.
From
within this context,
last one. This will be the last one.
This should be the last one. Yeah. Within this context, how can we talk about development without firstly addressing issues around democracy? Of course, democracy is also a way to organize society to facilitate the world. Democracy has been marketed also as a way for us to create better and dignified lives. We see our challenges also right now with what is understood as democracy. It doesn't mean that it's not important or that it's not useful, but that we have to critique and find where it has issues and where it has problems. But there are many other ways of improving life in society and creating dignified society, and we should invest in those. And it's not necessarily done through changing people every day and having people vote on a different on each and every day. There are many different ways. Let's invest in those. I'm not asking us to go back to the past and bring back the past. We cannot bring back the past, but as we move forward, we need to borrow and see what to change. Yeah. Am I liberated now?
No, I was, my mic was off, I'm sorry. I was saying thank you for what do you call the questions and your presentation. And it was eye-opening and enlightening to many of us who are technology neophytes. And probably will make us think even harder in terms of technology and what do you call discrimination, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and have a lovely day and good luck. Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
Okay.